Namaste, my friends. I want to start off by saying that this must be the one vlog that I've been most scared of making. It's so difficult to speak about women's safety, especially here in India, because I really cannot say anything without getting some kind of backlash. It doesn't matter if I say something positive about India, which I have previously done, I will still get some negative and even hateful comments for those things. And especially if I dare say anything negative about the Indian society, I will get a lot of hate. But I think that it is also something that is absolutely necessary that we talk about more and educate ourselves in. And especially now that I'm pregnant and we are actually maybe hoping a little bit more for a baby girl, women's safety, not just in India, but pretty much all over the world, is something that I'm very, very concerned about. You know, in the West, there is this stereotype about India, that India is just like rape, 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 and it's a terribly dangerous country for women, whereas Western countries hardly ever recognize those aspects about themselves. Painting this kind of a picture about India in the West is extremely hypocritical and definitely shows this double standard that Westerners have. For example, if we do some statistics comparisons between India and Western countries, if we look at rapes per capita, then we can see that India is not the worst country for women in this aspect. India is globally only number 5 in a survey that was made a few years ago, and countries like the US, the UK, and even the Nordic safe haven of Sweden are above India in these statistics. And my country, Finland, again one of the safest countries in the world, is number 10 when it comes to rape per capita. And okay, at this point, many Westerners might be saying, oh, but in India you don't report these crimes against women. But that is a big issue in the Western countries too, because just last year I read an article, I cannot remember the accurate numbers now, but it was a very big portion of women who would not report these kinds of incidents. Maybe because the judiciary isn't working efficiently, or because even in Western countries, women are still victim-shamed in these kinds of events. It is very wrong for the Western countries to keep judging that India is so horrible towards its women and women tourists, whereas, oh, the Western countries are taking proper care of women's safety. The question of women's safety is much more complicated than any rape stats or judicial systems. And I, for example, don't think that men's opinions have any place in this discussion, really. And this is a question that should be asked of women and not men, if some place is safe for women. Because the feeling of safety isn't just about statistics and rape and abuse and harassment. It's a much more layered concept than just numbers. And it's a very personal and individual feeling of safety. And that can be affected by numerous things, especially in India, I feel, because when I think about women's safety in Finland, I do generally mostly think about abuse, and especially domestic abuse, rape, sexual harassment, and these kinds of things that are more of the extreme side of the issue. And the issues in women's safety in Finland can't really that easily be seen in the everyday life, but here in India, where the society is still in general quite conservative and patriarchal, there are many different ways that these kinds of attitudes can be seen just on the streets and in the everyday normal life. And for example, in India, there's this concept called eve teasing, which basically in the modern language would be the same as sexual harassment, but this eve teasing is a quite old term, and I think it's quite diminishing to the severity of the issue, because I think it makes the whole issue of sexual harassment sound more like, oh, boys will be boys, and that's just like, you know, funny thing, nothing too serious to think about. And then, of course, like, so many women get stared at and followed. There are like actual real cases of stalking, which is, in my experience, quite normal in India. Boys will be requesting for selfies, they will be taking videos without permission. And since India is still a very patriarchal society, there will still be these attitudes that, oh, boys are the kings, and they will be raised in a very entitled way that if they want something, they should be getting it. And women are more seen as a father's, husband's, and so on possession, and they don't really have that kind of similar freedom of expression. And even social interactions are often seen more as negotiations. So if a woman says no, that's just the first stage of the negotiation, where you get to play out this whole lengthy kind of theatrical act where, oh, but it must mean yes eventually. They just don't know better yet. Also, I think that a society's attitudes about rape and other sexual incidents being a woman's fault are something that highly affects a woman's sense of safety in a society. And this is, of course, still something that is very prevalent. This is something that we can still see all over the world. Maybe in some Western countries the attitudes are slowly progressing, but I feel like in general in India it is still thought that it is the woman's fault and responsibility, and if something happens to them, it is the woman who brought shame upon the family. And there are even so many women still with these kind of patriarchal attitudes, and not just in India, but so many women, even in Finland, would be like, oh, but what were you wearing, and were you drinking, and oh, you should be more careful. And I, for example, have been raised to be very careful when it comes to being out alone at night. All of these factors combined are what really makes women's safety. Some people are more comfortable with other things, and then some have a very, very low threshold. So this is why I think that women's safety should be something that is always discussed with a woman. But then I do also have to say that you cannot just blame these women's safety issues in India on the Indian society, because I've seen quite a few women from Western countries or like just foreign countries coming to India for their travels and beach holidays and such, and it's quite clear that there either isn't much awareness about the culture, or it's just like complete ignorance and lack of respect towards the Indian culture's way of working, because there are some Western women who would do things here in India that they wouldn't even do in their own countries. And every time I see an article about a tourist being raped because they went drinking with a stranger or they went smoking weed with a stranger, I'm just like baffled, like, but why would you do that in a place that is strange to you? Because you probably wouldn't be doing this in your own country. Like, for example, I've had an experience of getting drugged in Finland, and I would not accept a drink from a stranger, and I wouldn't just like go to a stranger's house in India or Finland by myself. And then even some Western women tourists, like for example in Goa, they will go to grocery shops just in their bikinis, but I have never seen, for example, a Finnish woman going to a grocery store in Finland in just their bikini. That would never happen. That's not acceptable and appropriate even in Finland. So why would you do that in a more conservative country like India? And the average Indian man wouldn't have been made to go through these issues and learn about a woman's rights, because for them it is still the age-old attitude that a woman is a man's property. And because in India you also still have these divides based on gender, so men would not have even learned proper social skills and how to interact with women. So, for example, for them, if you touch their arm just in normal kind Western way, but to them that is like, oh, you are making a pass at them. So it's like there needs to be a lot of cultural awareness from the other side too. Even though obviously I never think that a rape is a woman's fault, but it's a really, really complicated issue. It is very challenging for even me to say if I think India is safe or unsafe for women. I don't think there is any kind of absolute truth to this, unless we were to say that the whole world is quite an unsafe place for women. But when I think about my own personal experiences and opinions, I would say that India can be safe, but it also can unfortunately be unsafe for women. I personally mostly feel very safe in India. I haven't really ever felt like I was in danger here. I don't feel very unsafe here, but I definitely do feel often very uncomfortable. And I have also developed quite a social anxiety here. Let's first get into my good experiences here in India, because believe me, there are so many, and I've met so many wonderful Indian people who are so kind and caring and would never even hurt a fly. So I've been living in India for 4 years. I've lived in Visakhapatnam, Jaipur, and now here in Kerala. So I would say that I have seen quite different cultures, and I have lived alone. I've lived with my husband and I've lived with my in-laws. And I have traveled in 21 or 22 Indian states so far. Obviously, most of my traveling has been with my husband, but I have also traveled extensively alone throughout the whole country. And for example, pretty much all my train travels are just me going solo instead of me traveling there with my husband. And I definitely have to say that I have never felt unsafe in the Indian trains. It's like a very pleasant experience, and I have nothing bad to say. I think that must be one of the safest ways to travel in India, and I'm actually more scared of flying than Indian trains. So yep, I highly recommend that. I have spent many nights in hostels, in dorms, where I might even be the only girl in the room, and there have been no issues except for those occasions when the Indian guys just won't shut up early enough and will be making noise late in the night. But otherwise, I've been feeling completely fine and safe, and it's usually a very chill time in those places. And for example, in Visakhapatnam, I was using a lot of Ola and the autos and never felt unsafe with the Indian drivers. And I think the best example about the Indian kindness, even from strange men, is that when I was traveling for the first time by land from Nepal back to India, and in the bus that I was taking to the border, I met this, I think, half Indian, half Nepalese guy who was a teacher. He saw that I was a bit confused with the route, so he offered that I can tag along with him and he'll take me all the way to Gorakhpur. And I had a good vibe from the guy, so yep. Or actually I should say a man, because he was 40 or so. So yeah, I tagged along with him and we traveled together to Gorakhpur. and we were arriving there late in the night. So when he heard that I was planning to spend the night at the train station before my early morning train, he was like, "Oh, no, you seriously cannot go to this train station. Please, I should come with him to his co-worker's family house where I could have a good sleep in a bed and get a nice dinner." And again, I had a good vibe from the guy, so I very gratefully accepted the invitation, and I had such a wonderful time staying with the family in Gorakhpur, and then I got a drive to the train station in the morning, and it was just like one of the biggest shows of kindness that I've experienced in India, and of the importance of also trusting my gut, that you can trust people here. And then, of course, I can't forget all my wonderful social media following who, for example, in a previous vlog where I shared the incident from my Goa harassment, everyone was just like appalled how people can do things like that, and I feel like so much love and blessings from most of the people commenting on my vlogs. And of course then my family and friends, everyone is always just like so concerned that everything is all right with me and that I'm feeling safe here and that there are no issues. And yeah, if I'm like in my Western stupidity doing things that might be questionable in the Indian context, everyone will just always warn me first and make sure that I do it the safe way around. But then unfortunately, there are many incidents in the past years that have also made me feel uncomfortable and anxious in many situations. And even though it's not the same as feeling unsafe, I would say that it is something that is very restricting to the normal way of living and things that I don't think that any woman should have to go through and take into consideration. It is a very difficult thing to be conscious about in the back of your head every minute of every day. Already the first incident that made me uncomfortable in India happened on my first trip after my husband, then boyfriend, had gone back to his work, and I spent 2 weeks solo in India, and I traveled from Manali to Rishikesh, and I took a local bus to reach Rishikesh, and in the bus where I had to spend the night, I had a single person seat right at the front of the bus, but then the guy behind me kept poking my shoulder throughout the whole night. As it continued, I realized that, oh my God, it's this guy touching me all night long, and I just wasn't able to sleep after that, and I felt really uncomfortable because that was my first time being in India, and I didn't feel comfortable bringing this issue up in a bus that was mostly just men and local men, because I wasn't sure if I would be the one who would be thrown out of the bus in the end. But I wasn't feeling too bad after this incident. It was only once I actually really moved to India and to Visakhapatnam that I slowly started feeling more uncomfortable. And now don't get me wrong, Visakhapatnam is a very lovely city and I had some wonderful times there, but it's also a city that doesn't have many foreigners there, and being a smaller city, it is also more conservative than some other places. In Visakhapatnam, it was unfortunately that I did not feel like I could be at peace in public places or walking on the streets, because pretty much every time I would go out alone, or even sometimes or often with my husband, there would be so many boys asking for selfies. So many times I would catch men taking videos of me without any kind of permission, and no matter how I was dressed in my lousiest clothes with dirty hair and just sweating all over, so many times a scooter or a car would just turn back after they see me and stop there and men would get out asking and telling me all sorts of inappropriate things, and that just made me feel so uncomfortable in being at peace walking in my hometown. And probably the worst cases are the so-called stalking incidents, because in my old neighborhood I would often go for runs, and during those there would be these boys on scooters who would actually start following me and then keep following me all the way home. And thank goodness our building had watchmen, so I felt comfortable going there, but it was quite terrifying to think that there are people who would follow me home and then actually know where I am living. And the stalking wasn't just a problem on the streets. It was very difficult for me to make friends in Visakhapatnam because groups of girls of my age would rarely hang out in the places that I went to. So then I initially tried making friends with boys, for example, through couch surfers or meeting up with new acquaintances. But even when I specifically say that I'm only looking for friends because I'm in a serious relationship, I felt like these guys wouldn't really take no for an answer. So yeah, for example, I went for these couch surfer meetups a couple of times and was on their WhatsApp group, but then there was all this sort of drama happening and I left the group. But even after that, I had a few guys from that group using my phone number, and they would keep every few months or so contacting me, even though I would keep blocking their numbers. And this would often happen with just people that I would meet one-on-one. So I went for drinks with this businessman, and I told him that I'm just looking for friends, but he did his best to try to kiss me, so I had to leave that meeting. And then also one of the actual first days that I was in Visakhapatnam, and I thought that I made friends from these new boys who also helped me to get a SIM card for an Indian SIM card for my phone. So one of them actually after this started really stalking me, and even to this date he keeps getting new phone numbers and messaging me every now and then, even though I keep immediately blocking him. And I've just really had to learn the hard way that I don't give my number to pretty much anyone anymore, because especially to men, because it has always led to getting this kind of harassment on my phone and just being stalked. And of course, these aren't issues only in more conservative, smaller cities or towns like Visakhapatnam. I've had very uncomfortable experiences even in a big cosmopolitan city like Mumbai. So when I visited Gateway of India there, I got stuck there for an hour having selfies with hundreds of people because I said yes to one guy. I've had so many people following me even in the Mumbai Colaba area, and in Jaipur I don't feel really comfortable taking Ola or autos even, and every time I do that I send the details to my husband or my in-laws so that if something were to happen, they have the details. And also in Goa, which is probably at least 50% of white people, I've had so much harassment. As you can see in the first clip, it's actually not just the groping case during the Holi that we spent in Goa, where I thought that it was just this normal oh yeah, the Holi thing, and then I suddenly got roped. And all these kinds of continuous experiences throughout years have led to the fact that I have to say that I've unfortunately had to change my personality. I think it's sad that I've had to become a different person in order to protect myself, because like my personality is like very outgoing. I like joking and laughing a lot. I flirt. I don't see that as hitting on someone. It's just like kind of, I find a nice way to show positive attention to someone without any like other kinds of agenda. And I can't look especially men in the eye anymore, and I've had to adapt the resting bitch face, which sometimes I feel like I'm doing 24/7, even though I am actually a very smiling person. And so many people in Finland have always asked me, how come are you smiling all the time? Well, not anymore. And I think that this is definitely one of the like worst things that has happened to me in India. Of course, I know so many women who have it much worse. They have like actual real experiences of abuse, assaults, rape, and so on. So this is like very less compared to those things, but still it is, I think, a sign of like a deeply flawed system that has to affect women this way. Pretty much all the women, that they have to protect themselves, even though the society should be making it so that we educate boys so that girls don't have to be protected against them. But as this sadly is the current reality, I also thought that I would share my best tips to feel safe in India as a woman, because like I said, I do feel safe and not at all in danger. What I think is most important is that you should have an open, kind heart towards India and Indian people when you come here. But in addition to that, it is also critically important to have like a lot of common sense and a good steady head between your shoulders, and be careful about different kinds of things, but also to sometimes follow your gut and trust people when they do show you kindness. And of course, you also need a lot of cultural awareness, especially if you're a tourist coming to India. So you should educate yourself on the culture and all the different aspects and habits of it, so that you know how to show respect towards the people and not invite that kind of unwarranted attention towards yourself. And one of the biggest lessons has been for me to learn a lot of confidence, the ability to strictly say no, and even be really, really rude sometimes if needed. You have to be able to ignore people and also adapt that resting bitch face that I already mentioned. Another good tip is that you maybe want to follow some locals and copy their habits. For example, if you do not see a lot of women in a specific place or area, maybe steer clear from that. Even though there are some destinations in India where it is okay to dress in a more Western way, especially if you are going to the more rural areas or traditional places, you really should follow the guideline of covering your shoulders and at least having your clothes to the knee length and not showing too much skin. It's also very important to make proper travel plans when you're traveling in India. So you should definitely know the place that you are going to, and if you, like for example, arrive at a train station and then need to get to a hotel, do find out beforehand how you can make that trip between those places, and most definitely avoid arriving in new places at dark times, because even now after 4 years, I must say that if I have to arrive in Delhi in the darkness, I will choose a different kind of schedule, even though I know Delhi pretty well at this point. And obviously, you should always avoid places where men get drunk, maybe unless you're in a big group or with like men that you actually know, and be careful who you trust. It's not a good idea to accept a drink from a stranger anywhere in the world. And then 2 more little habits that I've adapted here is that I have the phone always handy, and always when someone asks, I'm not single. I actually never was single, but always, if someone asks, say that you have a boyfriend or a husband. And one good thing that I was doing the very first time that I arrived to India, I was wearing a ring that I had bought for myself. So these are my best tips for feeling safe in India. I really regret saying that any woman should have to do these things, because I don't think that that's how it ideally should work. It's never a woman's fault if they get assaulted or raped. Boys, be better towards the girls. And girls, I hope you can feel safe wherever you are in your life. Please do share your respectful opinions in the comment section. And thank you so much for watching. I hope to see you again very soon. Bye.